Welcome to episode 51 of the Bass Shed Podcast. My name's Ryan Roberts. On the show is Keith Stixx. Keith is the owner of Tsunami Cables. I've been playing Tsunami Cables for a bit now, and I did a demo of their preamp, their 2 preamp, the V-15. I think that'll be coming out. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my demo for the V-15. One, fantastic preamp, and we're going to hear from Keith about that. But going into meeting, I brought the recording rig thinking I was going to be interviewing Keith. And it turns out I was going to be the one being interviewed about the preamp and doing some playing. And I was just in a different headspace. Like I wasn't kind of prepped to do some playing, you know. I don't know if I would have worked something out specifically, but I don't really do well in the situation where someone just hands you a bass and they're like, go. So I was a little caught off guard, but loved the preamp, loved connecting with Keith when demoing the preamp. I think he'll be putting out those videos pretty soon. A fantastic product, and it was great to hang with him. And we talked a lot in the studio then about just a bunch of stuff. And we covered some of that information, the things we talked about on the podcast episode itself, but we talked about some other things that I didn't know. I'm always interested in that. I'm always interested in what I don't know instead of rehashing stuff I already know. And it was a fantastic time talking with him. D. Lakin Basses. That's right. Dan Lakin over at D. Lakin Basses has been doing Dan's amp shop where you can check out some amps. He sent me a Demeter head. He's been doing some distribution for Demeter. The head is amazing. The head is absolutely amazing. Like EQs right down the middle. There's some toggle switches. I have those all notched to the left. So like that's the darker sound and that's the lower frequencies on the frequency presets. The model number of this. Are you ready? This is like the longest model number out of any amp I've ever encountered. I'm gonna read it to you right off the head here. It is the VTBP-M-800D Expialidocious, right? That is the longest. That is the longest. Like if someone said like, yo man, have you ever checked out the VTBP-M-800D? What? No, what? Why are you reading me the phone book? So it's a long product name, but the most important part is it sounds amazing. Check out the Demeter. Super long the Demeter head with the super long product name, and you can check that out at www.dlakenbasses.com along with the other things Dan has up there on the amp shop. Dan's amp shop, little platform there, dlakenbasses.com. On the topic of gear, I've also been using the Minnow by Trickfish Amplification. It's got, you can really dial in the mids on it, which I love. And it doesn't have this it doesn't have this really intense presence of preamp. It's just like these really kind of subtle boosts and cuts. So you still sound like your bass still sounds like your bass. Works great on my upright, works great on my electric. Go to trickfishamps.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed for 10% off. Again, I highly recommend the Minnow, and they got some new stuff in the works that I'm really excited to play. Trickfishamps.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed for 10% off. Double bass players, go to lemurmusic.com. What I love about this company is they're so involved with the community and other programs for younger musicians. I know that they're linked up with the school that Flea owns in Silver Lake. I think that's the Silver Lake Music Conservatory. I'd have to look that up. I have some friends that teach over there, but the name's escaping me. But Lemur Music is involved with them and a lot of other programs giving back to the community, and that's really, I think that's really special, and music being a part of what's happening and not just, you know, come buy bows and rosins and everything you need from the double bass from me, but they're giving back and they're very involved with that. lemurmusic.com. If you're interested in private lessons, go to thebassshed.com/private-lessons. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of emails just over the years and calls over the years. Sometimes it's bands going into the studio. You know, I remember I gave a lesson to the dude from Foster the People when they were doing, I think, their follow-up record to whatever the album was that had pumped up kicks on it. They were going to do the next record. And the bass player there wanted to learn more about reggae bass lines because he wanted that influence going into their next record. So, you know, sometimes it's things like that. Sometimes it's music theory. Sometimes it's reading. Sometimes it's jazz improvisation. Sometimes technique. I think regularly over the years, it's been a lot of theory stuff. Let me know the areas you'd like to continue to pursue within your musical journey. Shoot me an email at ryan@thebassshed.com and we can get that going. On the show is Keith Stixx, the owner of Tsunami Cables. And Keith and I are going to talk about his background and how he got into cable building and his history and kind of what led to that. That's a very specific part of the music industry. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss his V-15 2 preamp that I've had the honor to play. It's a fantastic preamp. We're going to talk about kind of maybe, I don't know, some of the, let's call them pitfalls of releasing a cable that's a little bit more expensive than a cable you can just go buy, you know, out of a bin at the local guitar store for cheap. Yeah, why spend money, the necessary money on a cable? We talk about that. And I think it's money well spent. I think it's absolutely money well spent. And you can now go to tsunamicables.com, enter the promo code TheBassShed to get 10% off. You know, let's offer a little something. Offer a little something to podcast listeners and the folks following the Bass Shed, so the cost might not be necessarily a deterrent in buying a great cable with a lifetime guarantee. I appreciate the time you took to spend not only in the studio when we got to talk a lot about amplification and electronics, and Class D amps and Class A amps and all that stuff, but how we talk more. And I got to learn more about his backstory in this conversation. And I really enjoyed that because, I mean, being a cable builder is such a specific thing. And creating a preamp that is very specific. That's also a very niche product he's released, but I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great product that he's putting out on the market. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoys learning about it. I definitely enjoyed playing it. And without saying any more, let's hear it from the man himself. This is my talk with Keith Stixx. Yeah, I'm doing all right. How you been?
Good, man. Good.
Cool. What's the latest?
Not much. Just you know, working away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
Just more, you know, more orders, cables, you know, getting on that kind of shit, you know, trying to do get stuff out to a few new artists, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Cool. So, what bass is that back there? Is that a Yamaha BB series?
Yep. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, is
that a rehearsal space you're in?
This is my little studio I have at my house.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's my Yamaha. The funny thing about that is, I got it when I used to own a recording studio, and we needed a bass for the studio. So I was like scouring, you know, Craigslist and stuff, and the guy wanted $150 for that with a hard case. And the two like downsides to it was he couldn't show that it worked. Like the electronics didn't work. You plugged it in, you didn't get any sound.
Yeah.
And then the hard case, like the handle broke on the hard case. So I took a friend of mine at the time, you know, who was just starting out being kind of a luthier and working on instruments and stuff. I'm like, hey, you know, come with me to see if this thing's even worth the shit. Sure. As soon as the guy opened the case, he's like, buy it. You know, he's like replacing all the electronics would be like, you know, $200. And he goes, you're still way ahead. And
yeah, as long as if the neck's in good condition, you know, and the bodies doesn't have any major dings, or you can live with the ones that are there.
Right. Yeah. It's got literally almost no dings on it at all. I mean, it looks great. And
the thing that always sketches me out about, you know, the used bases that are, you know, $100 to $200 is like the neck is probably going to be super warped because someone left it in a garage for 50 years.
Yeah. So neck's totally great. Works great. Everything, you know, there's no real dings or anything like that on it.
No, that looks good.
what it was the battery. The guy didn't realize that it was active.
No,
battery was dead. We put a 12 volt in it and a 9 volt or whatever battery in it, and bam, it was good to go.
Yeah.
And then I had it at NAMM because this was like my studio bass, and then it was basically just the bass for like in the booth at NAMM. And I had 2018 NAMM show. I had a kid come in and play it, and he popped like the nut, like broke it right off. And and it wasn't, he literally was just tuning it.
Okay.
Like, tank, and it just broke. And he's like, here's my credit card, whatever it costs, fix it. And I'm like, no worries. And
it cost $3,000.
Yeah, right.
That was imported from.
Right. Yeah. And so I, at that point it had all the like gold hardware and stuff on it that was all pitted and just looked gross. So luckily I know enough people in the industry. So a good friend of mine, Pete Hilton, did all the work on it. And then I know the guys at Hipshot, and it just so happened to wear their shirt.
Yeah, I know, coincidentally.
I know, right? And so I went over to Jason at Hipshot, and I was like, hey, man, I got this bass. I want to kind of, hot rod it up. I'm like, I hate the gold hardware. What do you have? I'm like, do you have black or anything like that? And he's like, yeah, man. So he sent me all the tuners, all the black Hipshot tuners.
Sure.
And then, and the bridge as well.
Yeah.
And so he's like, dude, just give me two, give me two cables. We'll just trade it out. I'm like, done.
Yeah.
And then one of my artists is E. Pruitt, who's the artist rep guy for Bartolini.
Yeah.
So he hooked me up with they're dusty, but he hooked me up with two Bartolinis and the whole preamp section too. So and then we built knobs to match it.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah,
I was checking those out.
Yeah, so we built those, and I built a matching cable for it too. It's got a couple of dings, a couple little, when you look at it in the light, you can see some reflections of some little, pit marks, little dings on it and stuff. But man,
it's gonna happen,
Right? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for shit, man, $150, you can't go wrong with that,
What do you got there? A Schroeder cab?
Yep, yeah, Schroeder. I'm good friends with George, so I got a Schroeder, and
he's out by you, isn't he? Doesn't he have a shop out there east?
He's so he's about once you came out to me, he's about an hour north.
Okay.
So have you taken the 15 out to Vegas?
No.
Okay. So
I've never driven to Vegas from LA.
Oh, really?
I know.
Oh,
there's nothing for me in Vegas. Like unless it's a gig, Vegas isn't. That's not for me.
Gotcha. I was gonna say because you drive like right past where he lives, so that's why.
Okay.
That was the only reason why I was saying that. But anyways, yeah. So he lives up in what they call the high desert area. So and so I've got Schroeder cab there, and I've got my little MB200 head, and then
want a 5? I think I'm gonna sell my 5.
The MB500. No, I'm good, man. But thank you.
Then we're done here. Then we're done here.
Right. So I added more stickers.
Oh yeah,
you got. I made it even
more
crazier.
flair to the punch out base.
Oh yeah. So.
You went to town on that,
dude. Yeah, I went ham. I bought like on Amazon. You can buy like these like $10 sticker packs that have like 100 stickers in them, and then they're all like themed. So I did like 90s cartoons.
Nice.
And then like all these other things. So yeah, it was stupid, but it was like, and I still have like, I went through them. I still have like a shit ton of stickers left. I just went
cartoons. I'm trying to think what were specifically 90s cartoons. Remember the one with Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and Bo Jackson? Remember that 90s cartoon?
Oh,
they had a name for the three of them. They were doing a Nike campaign back in the day. I think there was
right. What was
and then
that?
they did a cartoon of it.
Yeah. Well, there was Space Jam, which was the Michael Jordan thing with Bugs Bunny and all that shit.
Okay. What was the one with the dog? Oh, that was Air Bud. That was something different.
Air Bud. Yeah, that was And then, shit, I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to look up the one with Wayne Gretzky, because that's like one of my all-time heroes. So.
Oh, really? I met him once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was playing this private party, and there's a bunch of Canadian people there. And so it was him. It was Dan Aykroyd. Martin Short, like Pat Riley.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really eclectic mix.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Nice guy.
That's right.
Pretty quiet. Martin Short, on the other hand, not quiet.
Not quiet at all.
No,
Yeah,
not quiet
at all. Yeah. I went to so a couple of things. I went to his when he was on the Rangers. I went to his last game at
I forgot
where the
about
Kings
that.
played.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was so the Rangers were playing against the Kings, but it was the last time they were going to play before they opened Staples.
Okay.
And so it was at the old, I think it was like the old Coliseum or whatever it was, wherever they used to play.
Yeah.
So I went to that game, which was cool. And then kind of a weird thing. My dad used to play in a band with this guy, Warren Weeby, who was like a session singer. And he actually did all the demo tapes for We Are the World.
Okay.
And so like, they sent to all the different singers and stuff to learn the parts beforehand.
Yeah.
He did all the demos for that. And then he would being an LA guy, he would do the national anthem for the Kings games. And I guess Gretzky called him his lucky charm because every time he would sing the national anthem, or not every time, but every time Gretzky broke a big record, he was singing the national anthem.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess Gretzky was like, he had him as a big deal, like, man, you're my lucky charm, kind of thing. Whatever. I was like, that's cool, kind of rad, Yeah. So like all-time best hockey player of all time,
Right.
You're the lucky charm. That's pretty cool.
This is definitely the most I've ever talked about hockey in my life. I don't know anything about hockey at all.
That's hilarious. That's so funny.
I think I know more about that cartoon from the 90s than I do about the actual sport.
That is great. That's way too funny. Awesome, man.
Cool. So we talked about this a lot when we were at the studio a few weeks ago. You come from an engineering background, an audio engineering background.
Yeah. So drummer and audio engineering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, absolutely. Yep.
What kind of things were you like a head engineer at a studio? Were you just building your own studios and doing projects? Or what kind of engineering work were you up to?
Yeah. So when I went to Musicians Institute, first of all. So went to MI, for the drum program.
Okay.
And then because I, I grew up, well, not grew up, but through high school, went through school music and was a band dork and all that kind of stuff, and so and then I taught afterwards, like high school drumline stuff for a while, marched at San Diego State, the marching band, all that good stuff. And then had the opportunity to kind of, was trying to figure out what my next move was, obviously. And I wanted to play more and just be a better musician. And went up to MI, did like their little open house thing, took a tour of the place, thought it was really cool and jumped in. And because of the reading background and the school music portion that I had, being able to read music and all that kind of stuff, understanding rhythms, being able to sight read, all that junk. I tested out of a lot of classes when I got there.
Okay.
So when I got there, I showed up and I had a few classes I had to take of what they call level 1. I'm not exactly sure if they still do the levels anymore, but anyways, so I tested out of most of my level 1. So which basically just meant that by the time I got to the end of, my almost, I think it's like a year and a half, almost 2-year program, all I had to do was just basically take electives. Like it was just like filler shit, because they're like, well, you just need the credits, to pass. You've already passed all your core classes, everything else you need. You just need to take filler classes just to fill out the amount of credits. And they had just opened a secondary program where you could do and it was kind of geared towards guys like myself, where it was like you could take any of their longer programs, which is like a 1.5-year program, and then you could tack on like one of their 6-month programs, which was the audio engineering, the school music business. They have a whole handful. I think like the Luthier School is another one, and so you can kind of tack those two on together. Yeah. And it's not a major minor thing, but it's kind of like a major minor kind of deal, right? So anyway, so that's what I did. So, and because when I was doing the drum program, all of my teachers, all the guys that I really kind of gravitated towards were all the studio guys.
Okay.
So, and so that was kind of my thing. My private teacher was a big studio guy in the area. And
who's that?
Donnie Grindler.
Okay.
And so he actually ended up becoming at one point the head of the drum program. Then he moved to the dean of MI And
Oh,
then
wow.
he actually left. Yeah, and then he actually left MI, and he became the head of education for Guitar Center. So
Oh,
yeah, so all of
okay.
the and he's written a couple books and stuff like that. So big time education dude, Berkeley grad, phenomenal, just pocket for days, man, just phenomenal
Yeah,
player.
yeah.
And
But he was a session guy. What records was he on?
you know what? I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I mean, I'd have to look up his his discography, but yeah, he did a lot of jingles, did a ton of that kind of stuff. And if you don't mind, I got kind of a short story about that. Was kind of one of my first introductions to like being a session player. Was I used to tech for him. So once like I got to like my end of the schooling, I started teching for him, and then I even did for about a year and a half after I graduated. And so we went into a studio, I set up his kit, all this kind of stuff. And he was doing a session for, what was it? It was like a life insurance company. I don't even remember what it was, but basically what it was, the commercial was, it was like your history of life of like, finding the one you're going to marry, getting married,
right,
buying a house, all this kind of stuff. So it's like all these different things that involve insurance and different kinds of insurance through all these different parts of your life. Right. So they had a snippet of music for every single different part of your life history, right through it. And the coolest thing for me was they had the part that was basically like a 60-second tune. Then they would like take out a chorus, take out a verse, take out a chorus, take out a verse. And then the end was like one chorus. That's all it was.
Yeah.
And what was the craziest thing was he would play the whole thing down. Then the engineer would come over the mic and go, cool, take out the last verse. He'd be like, all right. And then he's like, we're rolling. Boom. He'd play it again. All right, take out the last verse and last chorus. And like they would just say it and he was just on it. Just, and I get it. That's a session guy thing. Right. Sure. But that was one of those things where at first I was just like, holy shit. It was just one of those like kind of mind, like, wow, and it was, and he was just like, yep, go ahead, run it, and then he was right in doing it. Okay. And it was just one of those things where it was just he was so on it and just, nailing every single take. Sure. And then it was like, all right, moving on to the next one, and so it was just, that was impressive for me.
Okay.
But anyways, I'm trying to not make a long story any longer, but
no,
sorry, I just ran over my headphone cord. So there we go. So I was doing the drumming stuff, and him and a couple of the other guys that I really, like I said, kind of flocked to all of them were like, if you want to be a session guy, you got to know what the engineer wants. You got to know what is behind the glass and what they are wanting from the drummer. Okay. And so, like I said, then I kind of got to the end of my drum program and I could go into the audio engineer program. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. I'll jump into that. Now I'll know what the engineers want, what they're looking for, and that'll just make me a better drummer.
Okay, I see.
So that was really the whole idea. It turned out that I actually liked the audio engineer program at MI better than the drum program. And the only reason really for that was because the class sizes were much smaller. Yeah. So, in the drum program, you'd have a class, a lot of times you'd have a class of like 25, 30 drummers in one class. Right. Where at the audio engineer program, like the most we had at one time was 12. Yeah. So you'd have 12 and then you'd have a lab class that class cut in half. So you'd only have 6. So I loved it. It was great. Way more hands-on, way more in-depth. You're right there working with the teacher. Mm-hmm. So I loved it. Okay. Left MI, went back home to San Diego and basically started like my own little home kind of studio. Built all my own cables, was recording myself, recording friends' bands, all that kind of junk. Yeah. And then moved up to the Temecula area and I did some consulting work on building a studio. Okay. And then through some
like sound like being a acoustician. Is that the word? Like
sure,
like
yeah.
treating a room. Yes, yeah. Okay.
Because they were basically what had happened, again, not to go super long, but what happened was a guy who had he's in the farming industry and he had a ton of money. did very well for himself, and basically just wanted a studio that that it would pay for itself, but that he could come in and record his own stuff that he wanted to record, and his kids were into music. He could bring his sons in and they could just play, have a good time.
Okay.
And that was kind of his
Just
idea.
An outlet, hobby.
Totally.
Yeah. Self-sustaining
100%.
hobby. Yeah.
100%. Yep. And, so they brought me in because I was the only one that they kind of knew at the time that had any real background in studios as far as, building a studio or anything like that. So I came in, did all the acoustic work, all the wiring, all the low voltage wiring through the walls, all that kind of stuff. And then through just happenstance, the guy who was building the studio that was going to run the studio afterwards ended up having a falling out with the owner. And so now the owner's like, well, I have a building with a recording studio in it and I don't have anybody to run it. And so, so then he hit me up and was like, hey, do you want to run this? And honestly, I kind of gave him a pie in the sky thing. It was just like, well, I need to, I'd have to move, it's like over an hour away. You'd have to find a place for me to live. And, I don't want to pay rent for a year. We got to get this thing off the ground. And it was really like, I'm going to throw this out there and you're not going to accept it. And that's my way out.
You're kind of trying to price yourself out of the gig.
100%. Yeah. And of course, what happens when you do that? The guy's like, sure, no problem. And I'm like, fuck, No. So yeah, so that happened. And, but I'm glad it did because I ended up meeting my wife while I was up here, all that kind of stuff. And now I live up in this area. So that was, it was a good change all the way around. It was kind of meant to be.
Are you still in touch with that guy?
No, actually, no. The studio kind of just ran its course. We did our year and a half that I was kind of contracted to be there. And I think he ended up selling it or whatever. But yeah, I'm no longer there. So, but it was fun. It was a cool little commercial type studio. It was fairly small. I would say, I always said it was like one step up from a home studio. Had a live room, had a control room, had a couple of vocal booths, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a cool, I mean, it was cool for the time. Let me put it that way. Sure. The time of my life and the time of when it was, all that kind of stuff. It was cool for that. But yeah. And so, and it wasn't really, it like I said, it was designed for it to be self-sustaining and for him to play. Mm-hmm. And so, and that became kind of there's a lot of problems with that, because you have a session booked and all of a sudden he wants to come in with his kids and the session gets bumped because, he's the owner, right. And that, then all of a sudden that session starts looking for somebody else, to go.
Yeah. He's going to lose repeat customers like that.
Yep.
Really
and so
quickly.
That was, so there was a lot of BS that kind of went on with that. But all in all, it was a really cool experience. I got to play as, the engineer, as kind of the house drummer. And I did most of we had another engineer there at the time too. And I got to, and I did most of like the business booking portion of the studio work.
Okay.
He did.
So you were kind of like the main guy there for all of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. We had, like I said, we had an engineer that he had, after we kind of got started, my thought was, okay, I'll book them, you record them. And then if you need help with the recording, I'll do the recording as well. But, it was more of like, I'll keep the studio busy, kind of thing. And it, like I said, it worked. It just wasn't, super, I wouldn't say valuable, but it
sustainable.
It had sustainable. There you go. That's a good word. Yeah. So
was this your first taste of finally being able to be a studio drummer? This is the thing you had been kind of, it's been rattling around in your head since MI.
Yeah, it wasn't the first, but it was because I had done sessions for other guys previously. But as far as being like the guy at a studio, that was definitely the first for that. And I absolutely loved it, man. That was like the best part, because I always, I've played in lots of bands. I've gigged all over, the Southwest and, all the way out to, close to Texas and stuff like that. So I've done the gigging thing. I've done the van tours. I've done all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it was like, for me, I just always loved the creation aspect. You know what I mean? Like in the studio, the writing the parts, the playing it, the, coming up with the sounds, all that part that I love that. the idea of, getting, and I still do this, I'm playing a corporate band now. But it's like, the idea of nailing down, 12 songs or an hour's worth of music to go out and try to, become a rock star and play. Right.
Yeah.
That just to me wasn't, I always thought about that, like, man, that'd be awesome. That'd be really cool. But now I've got to play the same, hour for the next like 2 years of my life. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that was always when I'm like, oh man, that's such a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So that was really kind of, like I said, that was, I think, one of the things that really drew me in towards the session stuff was just like, the creation aspect of it. I love that. I'm actually working on setting this whole thing, this studio up here to be able to, track and do session stuff from home, kind of, mail out tracks and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, so hopefully in about a month or so, I'll be up and running on that. So
cool.
So,
and then how long ago did you start Tsunami, and why Tsunami? Why have you named the company Tsunami?
So, the company's been, this November will be 15 years.
Okay.
And I started it very shortly after I graduated MI.
Okay.
So originally, my roommate, when I was at MI with doing the audio engineer stuff, we learned how to build cables there for the audio engineer program.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher that built us that taught us how to do the electrical stuff and building the cables and that kind of thing, he was like, look, you're in a one block size building that's 3 stories tall, and everybody here needs cables.
Yeah.
And they're like, why would you not just build cables and sell them here? Kind of thing.
Okay.
And so that was what my roommate and I did. We built a bunch of cables and we sold them literally for beer money. I mean, that was,
so it was just a side hustle.
That was exactly what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had no intention originally when we were doing that to turn it into a company or anything like that. I had, like I was saying before, when I moved back home to San Diego, I had my own home studio, my own little, stuff. And I wired everything in the studio. I did all of it myself. And I'd have guys come in and other bands I was playing with, stuff like that, come in to record. And of course they'd come in to record guitar or bass with some, super janky cable, and you plug it in, it's making all sorts of noise and having all sorts of problems. And I'd just be like, here, use this instead, and I just hand them one of mine. And they'd be like, where'd you get this thing? That's super cool, man, kind of thing. And then I'd sell it to them,
Nice.
And so that was literally like, that was the start of it.
Okay.
And I was very lucky, throughout, even up to this point now, where I've had a really, I don't know if it's luck or what you want to call it, but I've just had a really good time with guys that are either in the industry or are business owners or have had own businesses or business guys in general that, and I was, I guess, just smart enough to kind of just sit there and shut up and listen to what they had to say, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so one of these guys that actually is one of my first jobs I ever had in high school. He was a guitar player, but he owned a machine shop. And so I worked in a machine shop for a while. And he in high school and stuff, and he was an old 80s hair metal guitar player kind of guy, loved Randy Rhoads and all that kind of stuff, had all the V's and everything, big Marshall stacks and stuff,
Sure.
And so anyway, so
5 pairs of leather pants at some point.
More than 5. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one for every day of the week, so but yeah, and absolutely great guy. Still in contact with him to this day. Great dude. And so I was actually talking to him about doing the cable thing, and I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking about blah blah blah. And so he started asking me about, well, who are the main competitors that are out there? Who are the companies that are out? I'm like, well, obviously, you have Monster, which is the big guy, but the quality is not that great. And then I'm like, the one that really is at the time was the big one for me was Megami.
Okay.
And, and I was like, they make really good stuff, and, they're out there. And for whatever reason, he kept saying Megami wrong, and he kept calling it Tsunami.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah. And so literally I'm like, that's actually kind of a rad name, I'm like, Tsunami. It's obviously you don't want to mix water with electricity, but sure. I'm like, it's a big giant wave. audio waves, you know. And so I was like, well, shit, there you go. So literally we're sitting right there in his office, and I'm like, hey, pull up register.com real quick. Let's see if tsunamicables.com is available. And he's like, it is. And I'm like, here's my card, you know, like, and I bought it right then and there, you know. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was literally the fruition of that, how that came about. So total happy accident, but
okay,
yeah, it was pretty funny. So
now what,
we ran with it. We
talked about this at the studio too,
huh?
But what is specifically different about these cables? And when I use it and I feel it, like you can tell something is different just in the construction of it, but I don't know what's going on inside. What's going on inside the cable that sets it apart?
Yeah. So let me phrase it this way. Once you get into what I would say, there's two tiers of cables. There's the cheap, you know, $10, whatever, you know,
$10, 10-foot
GC special. Yeah. Right. So there's that. Once you get out of that, right? So now you're into the Megamis, you're into where I'm at, you're into whatever other company you want to put into that realm. There's not a ton of difference sonically. So what you're going to hear is not much different. Mm-hmm. So if you grab mine and you A and B, that's one of the things why I think a lot of times the cable shootout things are a little wonky because if you start matching, you know, well, this one has so much capacitance, this one has so much resistance, this one has so much of this one has so much of that. Sonically, I'm hearing this, sonically, I'm hearing that. First of all, you know, you're talking tone, so it's very subjective, right? Yes. To a certain extent, you can obviously map things out on, you know, a spec and, you know, go through actual frequencies, and you can do a lot of that stuff too. For us, the big thing is the durability. So you have all of that stuff, right? You have the super transparent cable. My goal, I was talking to some guys last night about it. My goal is whatever you put in one end is what you're getting out the other end, right? Right. So that's my goal. I don't want to color the cable or color your tone. I don't want to change the sound of, you know, your bass, your guitar, your keyboard, your vocal, whatever it be. Sure. I don't want to change any of that. I want to give you more of what you're putting in, if anything. Right. You know, if anything, I want to let more through, right?
Right. Give you the purest transmission of what you're generating with your hands.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I would say that when you get to that level of cables, everybody's doing that. That's kind of where everybody's at. Everybody has their own little niche, their own thing, their own whatever, their own vibe, right? Of what they put out. For us, for me at least, it's the durability standpoint. Yeah. It's the fact that whenever I was first starting out, and the guys that I was recording down in San Diego and doing all that stuff and playing and gigging with guys on Friday and Saturday, and then recording with them on the next Wednesday or whatever. And I would see guys have, you know, a really, you know, that $10 special cable on, you know, at the gig. And then they'd show up to the recording session a lot of times, and they'd pull up, like, you know, the Pandora's box, and gold light comes out. And you know what I mean? And they pull out this super expensive cable.
Right. Like, where did the choir come from? All of a sudden, there's just what's going on here?
Yeah. Right. And so because of that, for me, it was like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I just thought that was really like a stupid idea, because I'm going, well, okay, so if you're going cheap, you know, live, well, then now you're sacrificing your tone, and you're having issues, and you're wondering why your tone's cutting out and having problems or whatever. And I kind of get the idea that, okay, well, maybe you don't want to take the $200 cable out on the road. Okay. Because it's, you know, the going on the road, there's a lot of, it's going to get ran over. It's going to get, you know, ran over by, you know, cabs, you know, the bass player keeps running over it with his, you know, Ampeg fridge, you know, whatever. Right. The singer kept stepping on it, you know, whatever. Right. Like, there's all those things that happen. You know, somebody throws a beer on stage, and now there's, you know, sticky beer mess all over the place, whatever. Right. So there's all those things. So I get why you wouldn't want to do that. But to me, I just thought it was really dumb. I just thought it was a really stupid idea of why you would have two cables. And even though it's two different events, I thought it was just kind of a stupid thing. So,
like guest towels. You know? When people use guest towels.
Right.
I think that's the dumbest thing ever.
I love it. I'm stealing that analogy. It's
Yeah.
yeah. So
put that on the website, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So get rid of your guest towels. Use Tsunami Cables. I love it. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So so my concept, top to bottom, was taking that studio quality cable that's, sounds great, is very transparent, clean, all those things you want, and then just building it like a tank so that it lasts, again, and all of our cables have a lifetime warranty on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that, and it's kind of like the what was it, Tommy Boy analogy. I always say it wrong, but it's kind of like that idea where it's like, we put that on there. We put that on there because it's not that we are hoping that it fails and you come back to buy another one. We put that on there because it's a good product and we don't ever want it back.
Right.
That's the idea,
Yeah.
So, and likewise, that's part of the reason why we also don't offer certain cables. There's certain things like this year we're coming out with MIDI cables.
Okay.
And for a long time, I wouldn't do it because there wasn't connectors that were strong enough. There wasn't cable out there that was strong enough. And I just didn't. And I was afraid that we were going to put something out because I didn't want to put something out and say, well, all of these are lifetime warranty, but this one's not, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So, and then, so that was, one thing we did at one point, and we've done custom stuff for guys, we did, I did some stuff for some guys using line 6 stuff where they use the Cat 5 type, like computer cable, that kind of stuff. Some of the line 6 uses that stuff. We've done those, but I wouldn't sell those, to the public kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because they break, you know what I mean? And that was something that was understood. It was like, look, I understand you need this, but it's going to break. And I don't know why you're paying extra for it, kind of thing.
So what is, you have, in the product line, you have instrument cables, obviously. You have power cables. Do you do XLRs?
Yep. Yeah, we do microphone. Yeah. So XLR cables, we do a whole line of like balanced cables, which is XLR. So we do that. We do like the TRS quarter-inch balanced quarter-inch cables. So we can do like stuff for like your studio monitors, that kind of stuff. We can do, I'm trying to think of what else that, anything that's aux cable wise, like the mini headphone jacks, all that kind of stuff. We do, cables for like if you run wireless, the cable that goes from the wireless pack to the instrument.
Okay.
The little, 2 or 3 footers. We do those for a handful of different companies.
Do you do RCA cables?
We can do RCA cables. We don't get asked for it very often, but we absolutely can do that. Yeah, we do have that stuff to do that.
Seems like that's not a cable that people really going to drop some money on. Like, a durable RCA cable. You just go to Walmart and buy another one.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And it's funny because that's actually and it's also kind of an RCA thing is, we were doing cables we were trying to get into the tattoo world. And the cable the power cable that runs the tattoo machines are actually an RCA on one end to quarter-inch on the other.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, and actually while my wife was getting a tattoo, and I'm looking at the cable, I'm going, I can make that. And I'm like, mine would look a hell of a lot better than that thing. That thing looks pretty janky, Yeah. And so then I went and actually got that tattoo, and I brought
a car.
Yeah, it's a 51 Mercury. So there you go, kind of see a little better. But yeah, so one of my favorite cars. And so I had so I took my cable to the tattoo guy. And I was like, hey, you're gonna I'm gonna give this to you. You can have it, but I want you to tattoo me using this cable, kind of thing. So which is whatever, kind of dumb, but that's
whatever. I'm sure he was cool with it.
Yeah. He's like, all right, cool. You know. So but the problem with that whole industry is the mindset of the industry is cables are a $10 thing.
Yeah.
So for me to go, okay, well, here's a $60 cable and it's going to last 10 times longer than your $10 cable was. So at the end of the day, you're actually saving money. Right. They all go, yeah, but this one's $10.
Yeah.
And I just throw it in the trash and I just get another one. And it's like,
but you have to do that like 100 times. Like if I think about all the quarter-inch cables I bought in my life.
Yeah. Right. And the thing is that, and that's one of the things that, for a lot of people, a lot of times it's kind of difficult for them to kind of grasp is it's like, I always think about it. And they, when guys are like, well, that GC $10 cable works perfectly fine. And it's like, yeah, it works fine until it doesn't. And then guess what? Now it's, if it happens at rehearsal, that's better than it happening at a gig, obviously. Sure. But if it happens at a gig, you could lose the gig. You could be kicked out of the band. I mean, especially in like a corporate paid situation, you know what I mean? Sure. Like that, especially if you're a hired gun, that could be a reason you don't get a call back.
Right. Because they don't want to have to think about you. It's like, what happened? Like his cable didn't work. Okay, whatever. Like,
right.
Like, I don't want to. He comes with things I don't want to think about.
Right. And it's one of those things where you're going, you're making how much for this gig? Like, we're paying you how much for this gig, and you brought a $10 janky cable. You didn't even bring a second one, like, or whatever, right? So
although
it's
I've totally been that guy. Like asking the guitar player, like, oh, you got an extra dude, like.
So, so that's, there's that thing, and then you think about like, all right, I gotta drive the GC, I gotta spend the time to do that, whatever, and. So you have that. Then there's also the, while you're there, you're going to buy something else that you probably maybe didn't need, or maybe, whatever. Right. So there's all of those things. And again, how many times do you have to do that? I mean, I've had guys that were on tour that are like, man, we used to have to stop like every other show at like a music store or a GC or whatever, and be like, all right, trade out these cables, buy these things, get, pack of picks, get some strings, whatever. Right. And they're like, but we always bought cables. Like that was always a thing. We always had to, because they were dying. We always had to buy cables. And again, it's one of those things where I'm like, man, if you just, okay, sure. My cables, well, compared to the $10 one, it's 6 times as much. Okay, sure. But you don't have to go to GC anymore. You know what I mean? You don't have to eliminate that.
Right. And I kind of think about like that analogy with the cheap cables, or, something that's has more value, like sunglasses. Like if you're always buying cheap gas station sunglasses, you don't care if you lose them or break them because they are $10.
100%.
So that's why they're getting lost and broken. Like that's part of the reason.
Yep.
If you drop like, $200 on some nice sunglasses, you're going to get the case, you're going to get the little wiping cloth, you're going to, like, all right, these have a little bit more value. I'm going to protect the value of that. 100%. And I think that's similar with anything in life, and definitely music related. Like, okay, like I would that pawn shop bass with all the stickers. I wouldn't be as, I wouldn't babysit that bass the way I would my upright.
Right. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the sunglass thing is such a great analogy, because that's actually, that's myself and my wife. My wife is, because she'll wear a different pair of sunglasses for whatever outfit she's wearing. So she buys like the $10 sunglasses, For me, I'm like, I get Oakley prescription sunglasses. Right. They're like $600 sunglasses. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm like, I treat them better than I treat, my phone, whatever, and so it's like, so there's, I totally 100% understand that. And
so, I mean, there's actually a benefit even in that regard to spending more money on the thing, is because you're going to, most likely the individual is going to take care of it better.
Right.
And it has a lifetime warranty. So like all the way around, it's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I've always, there's a lot of perks too. I mean, we do, when anybody that goes to our website or sees anything that we do is going to see, we do a ton of crazy colors and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And, there's obviously there's like the individuality of that, whatever, like I like blue, so I'm gonna have a blue cable. Sure. Okay, fine. But
by the way, I just had an event planner get on my case for having your blue cable.
That's awesome.
The band leader comes up to me, he's like, what the hell, you brought a blue cable? I'm like, dude, these are the best cables. He's like, you don't have one in black? I'm like, no, I don't have one in black. It's like, dude,
that's hilarious.
So by the way, I need to get a black one from
you. All right. Yeah, we'll take care of you. We'll make it happen. That's hilarious. That's so funny. But no, it's one of those things though. It's like when you have a black, we've all done the gigs, bar gig or whatever, where you've got somebody else coming in behind you and you play the show, and you got to jump off stage, or a festival or whatever. And you got to jump off stage real quick, grab all your gear, head out. And then the next band's coming in. And before you can even get halfway off the stage, the next band's already setting their shit up.
Yeah.
And so, we've all done those gigs, and it's like when all the cables are black, that makes it kind of a nightmare, especially if it's a dark club or whatever. That makes it a total nightmare. When, you've got a neon pink cable,
right?
it's really easy to see. And, you know, if somebody else grabs it, you're kind of like, hey, whoa, that's mine.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not, you know, so I know that I have guys that have done where all their different cables, you know, speaker cables, power cables, instrument cables, microphone cables are all different colors.
Yeah.
So they can open their bag and they go, cool, blue is this cable. Blue,
right.
You know, red is
color coded. Yeah.
Yeah. They have a color coded system. They know what they're doing. Super simple. We have which is actually kind of an interesting thing, but we have Johnny Highland, who's like a chicken picking crazy guitar player, really amazing guitar player. And he's legally blind.
Oh, wow.
And so he uses neon green cables and he's like, I love them because I can see them.
Right.
And so, you know, that was never, that was not a thought. I didn't even think of that. I was like, wow, that's crazy. He goes, yeah, I absolutely, he goes, black cables, I just physically can't even see them.
Wow.
And he's like, the neon green stands out, so I can actually see them and I see where they're at. And I'm like,
right, you know what's going on.
Yeah. So, you know, so there's a lot of perks to the, you know, the crazy colors and stuff. Still to this day, you know, I mean, we sell more black than we sell anything else, obviously. Sure. But you know, I mean, those options are all there. You know, we have all the different options and stuff like that for colors and all that stuff too. So, but yeah, man. So,
cool. Let's talk about the V-15.
Yeah, buddy. Absolutely. So
I'll let you set it up and let's talk about why you created the V-15 and then let's talk about what it is first and then why you created it.
Sure. So the V-15 is a 2-channel all tube preamp. It is like what we would consider lunchbox style. It's not a pedal. So it wouldn't necessarily go on your pedal board. It'd go up on like your, you know, cabinet or something like that. And so it has 2 channels, both all tube, and the channels are the whole thing was basically inspired by vintage B-15. So, you know, so one is inspired by the early 60s and the second channel is by the early 70s. Yeah. So you have 2 channels of B-15, early 60s, early 70s.
Now, what happened to the B-15 in the late 70s?
So, I mean, there's going to be a purist out there that's going to go, you know, say something crazy. But, always. You know, always. Yeah, right. Always. So,
always in the comment section with like no name attached to it too.
Right. Yeah. It's just a bunch of numbers or whatever. So for me, again, I'm a tube like vintage guy. I just love that old school vintage tube sound. Yeah. So we decided to just go with the early. Originally, it was going to be just the early 60s. Okay. And then I was like, well, you know, the 12AX7, this is the tube that the preamp tube they used in the like late 60s going into the 70s. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, let's do that one too. And then we incorporated what they called the ultra switches, which were like a high, ultra low switch. Yeah. And so we incorporated that. I want to say that those came in, and again, that, you know, please correct me in the comments below. Only
on Tsunami's page though. Like leave mine alone. I don't want to read it.
I love it. So I want to say it was like around 74, 75, somewhere around there is like when in the 70s is when the ultra switches came out. Yeah. So we added those to both channels. So you have those for the 60s, you have those for the 70s. So channel. So there's a lot of cool things, you know, I mean, like you couldn't get that in the early 60s, you know, so that was, you know, so now you can, you know, whatever, which is kind of cool. The thing that I think is so you have 2 gain volume knobs on it. You have one per channel. And then you have the 2 ultra switches, you know, that mimic the ultra switch, right? And one's a high, one's a low. And then you have 2 knobs that are EQ knobs. So you have a treble and a bass knob for EQ. Yeah. And so when the knobs are at 12 o'clock, they're basically flat. As you roll them to the right, you know, clockwise, you're boosting the signal. As you roll them off to the left, you know, counterclockwise, you're taking the signal out. So, sure. So that's basically how that works. The thing I think that is what makes the V-15 so special is you can actually blend the 2 together. Yeah. So you can blend the 2 tubes together. So that's what's really cool about it. So really, it's like you have 2 V-15s that you're now blending together, and you can control the blend, which is really cool. So you can, if you really dig the 60s, and the 60s gives you tonality wise, it gives you kind of that Motowny, real low bottom, thuddy, round, fat bottom, sound. The 70s gives you more of a hi-fi, a little bit tighter lows, not so flubby, crystal.
I think I like the 70s a lot.
Right. Yeah. So, so for something like that, if you like the 70s more, but you're going, man, I just wish I had a little bit more bottom to it. Wish it just gave me a little bit more, on the low end. Then you can just turn up, 25% of the 60s.
Right.
And then on that 60s channel, you can even boost the bass.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like overhype the bass on the 60s, but then just mix it in just a little bit.
Right, just get a little touch of it.
Extra little bit of bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool because you can kind of get your sound like, oh, I really dig this, and everybody has their preference, which one they like a little bit better, and so, but it's cool because then you can look at that and go, okay, well, like to me, I like the 60s better than I like the 70s, but the 60s lacks a little bit of that clarity, so it's like, all right, well, I can turn the 60s up and have a nice fat low end thuddy bass, but then I can roll in some of that 70s a little bit and get some of that clarity out of it too.
Right.
So there's a lot of really cool options that you can kind of play with, and using the two, and the blend of the two, I think is the thing that really sets this apart among anything else that's out there.
Sure.
And then the next part of it too is all of the routing capabilities. So that's all of the vintage concept and idea.
Mm-hmm.
Then I basically brought it into the modern age and said, okay, what does the modern bass player need? So it's got to have an XLR balanced output, right?
A day job?
So, a day job, yeah.
Does it come with a day job?
Right. I love that. That's great. Day job not included.
Yeah, day job not included.
I love it. I'll put that on the box. So it has a balanced XLR output, right? It has a throughput that is bypassable. So it has an instrument level output that you have its own gain, like master volume knob on. So if you need to jack up that gain, you can, or take it out a little bit lower, you can. It has that output, the through is actually true bypass. So you can, if you click the switch, you can actually bypass the entire preamp. And then now the preamp's not affecting that output.
Sure.
It still would be affecting the balanced XLR output. It also has a line level output. So you can run this directly to a power amp or a powered monitor and use it as a monitor. So you theoretically could use this as your live rig,
Right. You could bring like the V-15 and like a QSC powered speaker or something, and like, boom,
100%.
done. Yeah.
Done. 100%. And, the other thing too, is it's like, for me, so many gigs are in-ears now, and they're all, there's no live amps on stage,
Sure.
So why lug around all that gear? You know what I mean? Unless you feel like you need to feel air moving behind you,
Sure.
Which I understand a lot of guys do, and that's fine. But if that's not something that you need, then why bring all the gear? You could easily just bring this, run the XLR to the house or to the mixer or however is running your sound for the PA, and you're dialed in, you're ready to go.
Yeah, man, you should really just sell those to churches. Like, churches don't use amps. They should just be like, everybody just get one of these.
Yep. Oh yeah. We've already been using it at my church. Every bass player I've had at my church loves this thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is an area we're actually pushing towards, is that because you're absolutely right. All the churches that I know are all in ears. There's no live.
Right. They all have the Aviom system and like the drums behind the.
Yep. Yeah.
The thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, so you have that. You also have a complete dedicated headphone amp built into it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can plug headphones into it, turn it on, and now you've got yourself like a really killer tube, headphone amp.
Right.
And it doesn't affect any of the signals going out or anything like that. So you can, one of the things that like I do, I always tell the church guys that I play with is, while we're waiting for the sound guy or whoever, guitar player to tune or whatever, it's like he can unplug out of the Avion and plug into the headphone amp of this, and he can dial his tone in.
Yeah.
So then he's happy with his tone. And then all of a sudden, they're like, cool, bass, go ahead and give me some sound. He can just plug back into the Avion, and hit his bass. And now he's already happy with his tone. And now it's going to the house, what he's sending to the house. So he can already have it monitored. He's already like, I'm dialed in, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So, so that adds a whole level to it. The XLR balanced out actually has a ground lift as well as a 20 dB pad. So if it, the signal coming out is fairly hot. So if you need to back it off, you can, which is nice. And then it does have a bypass switch on the back, but also has a 1/4-inch jack that you can plug an instrument cable into and then plug a pedal into, just like a regular, either like a Boss pedal, or we even are selling. I know it won't be on video, but we even sell a little, a
little bypass foot switch.
Bypass foot switch. That's all it is. And then that just controls it. So for a live situation, what's really cool is like if you're running this into a head and you only wanted this tone for say half the set, you could just walk up, click on the foot switch, and now it's bypassed and you're good.
Now, I think I know the answer to this, but I don't think we've talked about it. Is there a way to switch between the 60s channel and the 70s channel? Or do they always kind of run in series?
So no, they're actually running in parallel.
That's what I mean,
so no, that's fine. So which is good though, because in series, that means one would be running into the other one.
Right.
And so what would happen is then whichever one was second would always be being affected by the first.
Right. It's always getting the runoff.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So then if you really juiced up the first, it's going to affect how the second one handles it. So being the fact that they're running parallel, that's not affected at all. So the way you can, the only way you can quote unquote switch between one or the other is just turn one all the way off.
Yeah.
So you just take the volume and just roll it all the way to 0, run it all the way off. And now that preamp is not even engaged. Your tone's not even going through it. So quickly, that would be the only way, is just to turn that knob all the way off. And then you'd have the other one on. But and that's really a good way to kind of start when you're playing with it is, start with one turned up halfway at 12 o'clock and then, have the other one completely off so you can hear the difference.
Yeah, just the difference. And then start.
Yep.
And then get into the second one and start playing around with.
Yep.
There's a lot of options there. I remember that. I remember playing.
And it's amazing because there's only like 4 options per channel. That's it. It's 2 knobs, 2 switches. That's it. That's all there is.
But all the combinations and and degrees of influence, like how saturated are you going to have the 60s or 70s?
Yep.
In the overall sound.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And then I'm gonna be working on a bunch of the video stuff. And,
okay, I don't know if there's anything good in there. Like, I've thought about that several times. Like, shit.
Yeah, no, man. There's plenty of good stuff in there. So awesome, Ryan. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. I'll be in contact with you soon.
All right, sounds good, buddy. Thanks.
All right, thanks, man.
Have a good one. That was my talk with Keith Stixx from Tsunami Cables. Does anybody remember the name of that cartoon? Remember with Bo Jackson, Michael Jordan, and Wayne Gretzky? They were like this trio of superheroes. I kind of want to Google it right now, but I definitely don't. I don't know if that needs to be part of my day. That being said, it's probably going to be part of my day. The fact that it went down the 90s cartoon rabbit hole. Yeah, good. The V-15, check it out. See what that thing's all about. It's a fantastic preamp. His cables are amazing. Again, amazing cables. And I'm going to word to the wise, maybe get one in black so that the event planner doesn't tell you to switch out your cable. What's funny is the gig tonight is actually with the band that I was on with that. Like I was on the gig with this specific band when that happened. So I'm going to have to tell them this whole story. That became a little bit of a thing at the gig, was the blue cable, was having the blue cable. I like the blue cable. I like colorful gear. That's all I got, folks. If you're enjoying the show, hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to it on. You can also find me on Facebook, /TheBassShed, on Instagram @TheBassShed. On Twitter @BassShed. You can always go to www.thebassshed.com. That's where everything lives. And that's it for this one. That's it. That's all I got. I'm out. I feel like I've been super chatty on this one. I'm a little wired on caffeine right now. you know, started drinking a little bit. It sounds like it was booze. Wasn't booze. Started drinking caffeine. Keith and I recorded this early in the morning, so I started like kind of right before we started talking, and then by the halfway through the conversation, I was a little hopped up on caffeine. Now I definitely am. Oops. All right, I'm out. That's all I got. I'll catch you on the next one in a minute.